Thank you, Steve. I appreciate the introduction. I hope there's going to be a lot more downloads of my Marketing Today podcast, also on Spotify. So there's 2 plugs there. This panel is going to be an interesting one. We're going to talk a lot about mapping the goals against various platforms that are out there today. And we've got 4 lovely panelists today, and hopefully they're talking more than me. That's the goal. So I would love for you each to just kind of go down the line, introduce yourself, tell us your role, and a little bit about the types of video that you're using in your mix today.
So my name is Brooke Abney. I lead video strategy with a programmatic focus, but really performance video at Omnicom. And then also with a focus on emerging formats like audio, OTT, CTV, all of that. I would say our focus is really on attention. So where the eyeballs are at, Spotify is a great partner. We're really leaning into rewarded video. I think that, incentivized is kind of making a resurgence. And then connected TV is a huge bet for us as well.
Hi, I'm Kendall Shantz from Modus Direct in Florida, media director. And I came up in linear TV, but we can't hide from anything now. So we do pretty much a little bit of everything. We try to find kind of interesting ways to buy it, not a lot of programmatic, but we actually do what Andrew brought up earlier, and we use DSPs to kind of pick out curated mixes and buy them individually and stuff like that. But OTT and connected TV, VOD, subscription VOD, huge area of testing for us right now.
Hi everyone, I'm Shandi Shah from VSA Partners. I'm a media strategist over there, kind of overseeing how our overall campaigns kind of bridge the gap between from a media standpoint and from a creative standpoint. In terms of the areas that we focus on, it's a little bit of everything. We work with a lot of clients with pretty limited budgets, so we're looking for the most measurable and efficient ways to target our respective audiences. So typically it's moving a lot less up from traditional television, moving more towards addressable and connected TV.
Hi, Lee Tran at Proof Advertising, independent agency in Austin, Texas, and my background is really almost 2 decades in digital, but then recently made a shift at Proof where I'm in charge of all media, and I like to call it tradigital. So really looking at how we take all of media and what are all the consumer touch points. We have clients like Texas Tourism, where we've completely shifted to all advanced TV. Down to Subway, where we're a lead local agency, so not doing national, but how do we plus up different markets from Seattle down to Texas. And then we have some clients like Apothec Wines that actually with them, we don't do any TV advertising, and we focus only on Facebook or Mauser Electronics just on YouTube. So just an interesting spectrum of video channels.
Great. So there's a lot of different variety of the ways in which you guys plan based on the call we had before. So I'd love just a couple of examples of how do you plan against all these various platforms that you can, and channels that you can put your video out into, and what examples can you use maybe to bring that to life for everyone in the audience? Anyone want to start first?
I can go first. So VSA is a design-driven creative agency first, and media is definitely a newer practice within the space. So it's a little bit of a different approach than what I'm used to at other agencies in the past, where you're thinking about how your creative is performing first, and then where it's being executed. So it definitely keeps things interesting and from a planning standpoint of, okay, well, this is what our creative is. We have to advise our creative team on how to make whatever that piece of creative is the most executionable. So from a video standpoint, it's trying to make our creative work in that respective space. So again, going back into finding out exactly where our audiences are and how do we make that the most efficient buy. We traditionally, like I said, work with pretty small budgets for our clients. They range from everywhere from CPG to B2B, but knowing that we've got a limited budget, we have to make the most efficient buy. So as targeted as we can get is usually where the fundamental planning starts from.
Yeah. I think for us as a large holding company, it really goes back to the stat where we were talking about half of TV is planned and bought, outside of the digital spectrum. And for us, it's really about getting upstream in that planning process because programmatic for so long was really an afterthought And it was really, the strategy or digital investment teams would divvy up their budgets based on all of the different channels that they wanted to have a presence in, and Programmatic got their budget, and then the Programmatic teams would then have a whole nother strategy session, right? So now we're really trying to break it down so that, there's a reason why there would be a direct IO or a publisher direct buy, but if it doesn't have influence from the Programmatic team and there's not a data-driven reason why that's going, publisher direct, then there's a failure there. And we really just want to make sure that everyone's at the table and that everyone's aware of the holistic strategy.
Yeah, I think Modus Direct is a direct response agency, so we're pretty much purely ROI based. We're also really small. There's only 12 of us in my office, so we don't really have the siloed effect as much as some agencies, but that's really, really lucky for the times that we're in right now. We basically sit down with our digital team, we're like, you take this one, we'll take this one. And a lot of times it's based on how are you able to track it. Because to your point, performance is the end goal. It doesn't really matter. The digital team versus the TV team is not going to get a vastly different CPM using a different platform or a PMP, et cetera. We just need to know what it's doing. So, working with a lot of the connected TV executions on the television side is about being able to baseline and measure lift. And, Nancy touched on, pixeling all your pages. Like, we handle all of that in a very digital-esque way in our TV department to make sure that we're able to measure as well as we possibly can. And really, everything is measured on the very low end of the funnel. So even though obviously linear television has a huge, high end of the funnel and brand impact side, we look for the impact at the very end. That's what we measure.
And are you planning a lot of linear, or is it mostly more programmatic and addressable?
At this point, I think it's about 80% linear, 20% emerging, advanced, connected, whatever you want to call it.
Well, just a quick poll of everyone. I mean, how are you guys measuring all of these various mediums, to try to drive ROI?
Depends on the client and the goal.
Go ahead. For travel, or for Texas tourism, we actually are working with Simulmedia's in the room, as well as SpotX. And with SpotX, we were their first, if you don't know them, they're a supply-side video company, but we're the first advertiser to really pilot with them and Nielsen a total audience report that really allows us to see what our linear TV as well as our connected TV and what sort of unduplicated incremental reach we're getting. So that's something that I think is the industry's moving forward, which is great to see. So that's one, but down to business solutions, Proof is a creative business solution agency, even though we're full service, and we really look at how we solve clients' business needs. And from a Subway standpoint, our key measurement is foot traffic. So with everything we do, we try to actually have Foursquare attribution as one of our key measures beyond the typical stuff of views and click-throughs and all that.
What examples can you guys give? And clients, you can blind them, I guess, if you need to, because this is being live streamed. But would love some examples of specific platforms or specific channels that you're using and what kind of results you're seeing.
I think for us, it's, again, when you have a large holding company and you have such a siloed or silos of buying departments, it's hard to really tie it all together, especially when, some are really at a household addressable level, some are one-to-one user targeting. So again, for us, it's really about upstream planning and then being able to take strategies like TV extension, leveraging whether it's set-top box data or ACR to then have more contextual alignment. And I think, to the vein of premium quality, it helps Programmatic really at that planning table, but also move away from the long tail and into the premium inventory and strategies that align with what's been traditionally done in the linear world.
We get really literal with our kind of performance tracking. Obviously, direct response is heritage, like toll-free numbers, unique URLs. We still do that for some campaigns where it's appropriate, but a lot of the connected TV tracking is really, it's a channel mix test a lot of times, right? We talked about that a little bit on the call when I met you guys, was, you have to choose markets and just hold one thing out and test another, test a different mix in a different market. We're executing a few of those right now, and I'm really excited just to see what that does. But on the national level, we've been really successful just using the unique URL approach and one-to-one tracking with a lot of platforms. And I think, kind of using that curated approach rather than an automated programmatic type strategy has really made a huge difference in our clients' performance, because just like planning a linear TV buy, you're going to have some networks that have the exact same cost per lead, but once you get down the funnel, you know, the cost per application, the actual conversions for your clients, that quality is going to vary vastly, and we find the exact same thing, obviously, with different publishers. So kind of getting away from an automated optimization system and really going in and looking at the data individually, channel by channel. Obviously, we don't have kind of the time to do like thousands of publishers that way, but we've been really successful with the few that we've done. So, I mean, it's labor intensive, but like going on to like Weather Nation and Newsy as like individual OTT channels rather than on a whole Roku buy, that's been more successful.
I would say for us, it definitely varies by the clients and their respective KPIs, but one that comes to mind is an e-commerce furniture brand that we've done pretty much our entire buy was advanced television. But we did have some respective markets that needed some extra love and attention, so we supplemented our advanced TV buy with some local cable. And one of our biggest things was that, again, we're working on a pretty, like, our budget was about $12 million, which is not a lot in comparison to our competitors that were spending about $30 million a quarter. So we know we're not spending enough money to actually be in comparison with them, but how do we have the most efficient buy? So where can we almost continuously optimize, kind of with what you were saying, that like you look at everything on an individual basis, but outside of television, even with our digital, we wanted to make sure everything was kind of working one-to-one. So if we're seeing something perform really well from a connected TV standpoint, how does that compare to addressable or VOD? But then, again, from a digital video standpoint, where are we seeing that and how do we make them work together? Ultimately, by continuously doing that, and it definitely was very labor intensive, but by continuously doing that, we ultimately saw over 100% lift in conversion, which was awesome for our client. Their traffic to their website, they actually had to shut down some of the program because they couldn't handle the volume of traffic, which is, you know, it's not great to have that problem, but it's also from a media standpoint, it's amazing to have so much traffic that your client can't handle it. So that's really great, but it is labor intensive to have to look at every piece and make sure those data points are then connecting with their next impression, so that when you think about someone's almost like daily journey is how I like to put it, of like connecting with them throughout the day within different video channels, is like, it's so hard to track every single moment, but when you do that, you get such a great lift.
Tracking is, to me, a really loaded question. If you are only in the digital world where you can connect everything, it makes sense. But even then, there's the break-off points, there's cookies a day, especially with GDPR and privacy and people turning things off, being more aware. But for all of our clients, we really look at the industry. Every industry, we believe, you just have to figure out what the resource and tools are, can help in terms of third parties. So for travel, we work independently with the research company, and I definitely believe in third-party company and audits to help bridge the gap, but that's where we look at what did our advertising do in terms of return on ad spend. And for that, that's tax dollars and hotel. So we look at it independently and survey the consumers we're supposedly touching, again, through the control and variable. But that's rigorous. It's something that happens usually in a 2-year run, but we do monthly checks. But that helps us be more accountable to the things that we can't connect in the offline world. And then we, of course, do the typical stuff where we try to find things, like I mentioned before, Foursquare, where how do we look at data with smart devices today and really understand that we moved the needle and brought someone into an actual location.
So we saw some stats earlier about where people are shifting money around from linear to publishers to all kinds of different moves. How are you guys approaching that? And are you moving money around for your clients going forward? And is it very, is there rules around that for you? Whether it's verticals that work better with addressable or however it might play out.
The rules for us always is being accountable. Our name is Proof for 2 reasons. One is just proving things out, and another one is just inspired by alcohol and proof content. But for us, it is proving things out with our clients as real-time as we can get. From our standpoint for Texas, we went from basically a 2/3 overall budget reduction. So as you can imagine, we're working with 1/3 of what was available before. And with that, we really had to shift and be a little bit more kind of risk takers and figure out how we take what little we had and still make lemonade. So for us, that helped us make some drastic shifts where we decided to go completely advanced TV. We used to spend 66% of our budget in the true linear TV, as we all can imagine as media buyers, and went completely towards advanced TV. And from that standpoint, we're already seeing great results, but having to work with less, we had to figure out how to do more with that.
I think it depends on what I can get the client's permission to do sometimes. Some campaigns I would love to be doing a ton more advanced testing, but obviously, you know, companies that came up looking at $2 CPMs see like a $50 addressable CPM and want to fire me. So it's kind of it's a challenge. You know, I saw the Nielsen CMO report that just came out where they surveyed kind of perception of media performance. It was 31%, I think, of CMOs just didn't answer the question for connected TV, which kind of is a really good picture of what it's like being me, I think, on the phone kind of trying to sell this through. And all the tests that we do have been just really different. So I can't really pin it down like this vertical, you know, connected TV is great, this one never do it. We don't really have an answer to that yet. I mean, I hope to in the future, but I suspect that it'll come down to was it a good enough execution or not, similar to linear TV. That being said, obviously some campaigns, it's really appropriate to get really targeted. We had a financial client who wanted to do you know, a millennial first-time homebuyer campaign earlier this year, and I think the mix was almost 50-50, kind of like advanced television and linear. And on the kind of one-to-one attribution, the linear TV still won, which really impressed me. I think we all had the perception that, you know, the millennial consumption of all the new media is so much higher and they're so much more engaged, and that's definitely true. The research kind of proves that, but then how they're converting, I suspect, is very different. So we're just working on developing the tools to kind of prove that. That being said, that was the heaviest, I think, weighted campaign for a very, like, linear heritage agency. That was the heaviest we've gone into advanced TV, and it was a really successful campaign overall.
I would say for us, the rule is that we try to push that there are no rules with our clients, but I agree with you. It definitely depends on the account. Some are a little bit more rigid and some are not, but what we try to do is, because we're constantly trying to make those optimizations on an individual basis, we're shifting money around pretty often. So if we're seeing, at the end of the day, we're all trying to make money for our clients or make money ourselves. So if we're seeing that there's one area that isn't delivering any type of conversion by any means, whether it's an actual purchase or submission or just driving traffic somewhere that we need them to, we're going to pull money away from there. So our biggest thing is that we've seen in the past, like YouTube, for example, we time and time again haven't had that much success with it. From an awareness standpoint, it's great, but in terms of action driving, it doesn't do much for us. So we shifted our dollars into more outstream video that you pay upon completion, and that has pretty much been true across the board. We're seeing a lot more delivery from connected TV, but scale is an issue there because you don't want to see the same ad on Hulu over and over again. And so it's things like that that we're trying to constantly do. So we're pushing the idea of like, let us, hate to say this, give us your money and we'll make sure you get some type of return on it, but it's going to have to be fluid across the board.
But I also think it's where it's interesting for you. YouTube doesn't, it depends on the client. For our B2B client, we produce a lot of original content as well as what we heard with GE this morning, where we're tackling very tech-oriented subjects and being thought leaders in tech. So right now we have something called Generation Robot. We're hitting, you know, a male audience, tech people, and YouTube is where we find the best success, and that's where we spend all of our dollars versus looking at any other channel. So I really think it's the consumer and the context of what you're trying to message.
Yeah. I completely agree with everything, especially, you know, it depends on the client, it depends on the client's maturity, their vertical, all of that. For us at Omnicom, you know, it depends on the client, I would say, but it also, everything we can push to what I would call data-driven, whether it's advanced TV or true like programmatic one-to-one decisioning, we want to push it there, but in a curated fashion. So I've heard a lot of people, you know, when they talk about programmatic, it's the DSP does it, you know? No, it doesn't. And if you're relying on the DSP to target your audiences and buy clean inventory, then you don't have the right team in place to make sure that you're in brand safe environments. That's just the truth. And so for us, we want to put it in automation pipes as much as we can to have that holistic view of the user. But it needs to be in quality environments that align with, you know, the environments our brands want to appear in. So we do about 70% of all of our video in private pipes. I foresee that increasing, and I do foresee our linear going down, but it has to essentially replace what we were doing in linear and be very contextually aligned.
One more question from me, and then I'd love for you guys to ask each other a question, if that's okay. How are you stitching together all the various ways to find the audience across all of these platforms? Just any tips, advice?
It goes a lot back to your pixeling strategy, your first-party data, you know, how you're collecting information on those users. I would say we also lean heavily on the walled gardens to help us, especially for our CPGs or any of those brands that aren't really driving a ton of like site traffic. You know, the walled gardens, as much as they don't want to share their data, it is very strong, and they know a lot about us. So we look to them and do a lot of insights analysis pre-campaign launch.
So I really like the way Shandy put it earlier, kind of what does their day look like? How do you touch that same person throughout all the different channels they're consuming? And I think obviously there's a ton of data out there, but kind of knitting together an experience for consumer of your brand is more than just a total of impressions in a spreadsheet. You really need to do more like holistic research about the consumption. And we're really trying to focus on staying educated and getting more educated. I mean, you know, we had another kind of Gen X specific campaign recently that we did a ton of research, and just over and over again it kept coming up how heavy like satellite television consumption is specifically for, you know, this Gen X consumer that owns this size of a house with this credit score. So there's these kinds of things that are really specific psychographically, you know, not just kind of, you know, how old are they, how much money they have, like kind of what's easy to pick out on a DSP, but like do your research about, you know, the business that you're trying to serve first, and then just follow that.
Completely agree with that. I think a lot of it is understanding that whoever you're targeting, they're, at the end of the day, they're a person, so they're going to function just like most people do, but their business is different, and so you have to think in their shoes of like how their daily journey is going to go, but then also proving that with a really strong pixel strategy of like making sure that, you know, where you're seeing your traffic come into your website versus where you're seeing them leave to, like having that kind of data is really supportive of like, okay, well, what's actually driving, what's referring to your website, and where people are bouncing to. So getting a good understanding of that, but then kind of turning it into a holistic picture of how to target them as a human is really big.
From our standpoint, it's if we have the luxury of having a client where we kind of manage everything. So for us, digital is at the core of how we stitch together. I think the question was tracking. So if we get to manage the website in entirety and have all the keys to that, if we manage the email program and have all the keys to that, if we have a great alignment with our clients, you know, sales team, when we have all that, it's a little magical, and we can better stitched, you know, who is the potential audience, who is our core customer. When we don't have that, I think it is problematic, and that's where we go to things like panels and a day in the life. But you know, the dream, and it's interesting if we're talking about agencies, is is it better to work with a lot of fragmented ones, or is it better to have one that is kind of, again, trying to see the whole picture and manage that? So that would be my question for this team: is kind of, you know, your best key client when it comes to what we're talking about. How do we advance TV? You know, what parts of the keys do you guys control, and you know, does that help?
I definitely agree that when you have all of the keys, it works so much better, but time and time again, we've got clients that can't give it up. They just won't release that information to anybody, regardless if you're the AOR or not. And that's, I'm seeing that more and more overall, that even they don't want to share their CRM list, so we don't have that first party data, which is so valuable to have. So you have to supplement that with other pieces of information, and that right there is like our biggest struggle, is that getting them to understand how important you're having your first party data, how having access directly into your analytics and your performance stats. Anything that would help define where audiences and how they behave with your brand is so important. So I agree entirely. When you have all of that information, you can make it work. So that e-commerce furniture brand I mentioned earlier, we had probably like 8 out of 10 of the keys, which really helped make our campaign work really, really well. But we're seeing for other brands where they can't even share their CRM list, or their CRM list is so small because they don't do a good job of that data management, that we're seeing a lot of more like hand-holding needed essentially with our campaigns, where we have to constantly make changes because we're just not seeing the delivery that we want to see.
Yes, it's much easier when you have all the keys to the kingdom. We have a lot of finance and healthcare clients, so that's not always easy for them to do, or even legal to share everything with us. Obviously, anonymized data, can go a really long way, but just facilitating that is really challenging. We've had Experian in the past, be that third party and facilitate that and put together lists for us and stuff like that. And I hope that that will become common, because that's still a huge challenge. Like even some of our clients don't want to share with Experian. It's like, they already know. But, so that's an education thing that we're working on. But yeah, I think we love kind of the hand-holding in a way. It takes a lot of time, but also you just get better and better. So kind of the best clients are the ones that want to get in there with you. The ones that just kind of want a pat answer, it's really challenging to kind of come up with a good campaign.
We've actually had to re-operationalize our entire marketing science division, which is our marketing insights group, because 2-3 years ago, marketing or insights, let's just say, were an added value, right? It was just more information that you got on your campaign, and it was cool to see after the fact, right? Now, and that came with certain spend thresholds as well, right? Now, it has to be the heart of all the planning, and so we've had to basically re-engineer our team so that every brand has access to those resources, so that it really is leading not only the programmatic conversation, but any kind of direct buys, sponsorships, anything like that. So it's a lot of front-end investment that doesn't always lead to campaign dollars, but it's really how you get data-driven planning to the core of that advertiser's thought process.
Any other questions you guys have for each other?
I have one. I know we kind of started talking about this on our offline phone call that we had, but we also work with the CPG brand, and one of the things that we try to do, it's specifically a cheese brand, and we try to directly tie it into lift in foot traffic. So I'm curious to hear your experience with Foursquare. We've worked with several other partners in this space other than Foursquare, and it's one that we're considering working with now. So I'd love to just hear kind of how you've seen any type of lift, or what kind of data you're getting that helps your optimizations to increase that foot traffic.
So we work with CPG brands too, and they vary from barbecue sauce to wine, as I mentioned, and worked with other ones in the past. We've worked with the other attribution partners. For Subway specifically, it's one where that was something that, again, looking at data, kind of really driven by national corporation on let's just try to vet out at that given time. This was, I believe, 2 years ago, all the different attribution partners, and then really determine who satisfied the business needs for Subway overall. And so from that standpoint, again, it's just vetting out all the tools. Subway, we chose Foursquare attribution. And that's the same for our CPG clients. We've leaned more towards other partners that I don't want to, we can talk offline. And those, we chose for different specific reasons because we felt that they were better with their footprint on stores.
Yep.
Other questions for each other? This is a rare opportunity.
What activities have we signed up for?
What's that?
Brew tour.
What activities?
What happened to Spa
Brew
Day?
tour? I think it's
I'll
oversubscribed.
ask a really specific question. So, you asked, how do we stitch together plans, and we all answered it really conceptually, which I think is easy to do because everything's different. But specifically, do you have favorite OTT or connected TV channels that you've worked with that just work for everyone?
My marketing department said I was not allowed to name specific partners, but they're in the room. I will
tried.
say that.
I will say the exact same thing. I'm not allowed to say who, but the ones that we do love working with, they know it. We tell them.
No comment down at the end. Yeah.
It depends on the client. I already mentioned a few for Texas tourism, so I would vouch for those two companies. But I really, again, I think it really depends on the campaign and the channel. So.
And I'll go a little bit further. Why I really prefer these partners is because I was the one that put the comment on the board about everyone wants to plan traditional, like in the traditional way, but then they want to measure and target granularly. And what this partner really provided us in the beginning was the transparency to really be able to transition those dollars to programmatic pipes. Before in traditional linear, when you're planning on TV shows and day parts, and then you transition that into a programmatic pipe, and all of a sudden you lose that ability, that makes advertisers very uneasy. And it was just a way for us to make them a little bit more comfortable with transitioning the pipe in terms of transaction, but still getting a lot of the same content and that living room quality experience that they were traditionally used to. So.
Maybe that's a good way to answer Kendall's question for the rest of you too, is what do you like about, without naming them, what do you like about the publishers that are performing well for you?
Yeah, mine, I'm a true programmatic down to my core. It's all about what's being passed in the bid request. As much information as possible is really what we need to be able to scale OTT in a programmatic fashion.
Yeah, I would say I'm a data geek, so the more information that you're willing to share with us, the better. So as transparent as you can get, we're gonna love you. So it helps us do our jobs better of understanding kind of how the audience is reacting to certain things and kind of where we're placing, how we're placing it, the dollars associated with it. It just helps us. So the more data that we're willing to get from our partners, like for one of our partners that we worked with, we asked to have pre and post logs, which is part of advanced television is not really a thing anymore. And it's like having that same idea of using your traditional television hat to turn that into an advanced TV buy. But we were like, this is something we need to have. And they were willing to share that with us, and that really kind of put them in our good graces because it was just, it's not traditional forms of data that they're willing to share, but we were able to get it. So any types of like flexibility you have with data, and the more open it is, the easier it is to make those optimizations. So that's kind of where we see our working relationship excel.
Again, we don't have favorites at our agency. We don't have our own pipes. We like to try to figure out different business solutions for every client. But because Travel Texas is an open records government account, I can speak freely, and why I'm fine with that. We basically went advanced TV and really paired simulmedia with SpotX. And why we like simulmedia is it is really looking at programmatic linear TV, the old school inventory, but really trying to be smarter with how we choose where we run. And their platform, their dashboard, they did not pay me to say this, and that's why I'm not here. It's something where if you haven't tried their platform, you should actually just see it. And the problem with simulmedia, though, while I love them, is they really just play in the PTV space today. SpotX really is supply side on all inventory and video, and so they're a good complement. So they really have the OTT, CTV side of it covered. So those are two platforms and the reasons why we choose them.
Great.
We have time for questions in the audience if you want to chime in. Back here.
I was wondering if any of you have leveraged linear addressable TV, and if so, kind of how and what were the outcomes?
Yes, we have with a different travel client, San Antonio Tourism. We did that a few summers ago where their budget doesn't allow us to really do a lot of TV. Usually if we do TV, it's in select markets like upweighting in Dallas, and that's really the linear TV. But we did a pure adjustable TV campaign where we were targeting travel intenders. And the problem with that is, it was going beyond where we really wanted to focus. But we did that successfully. Again, that was 2 summers ago. Things have changed with adjustable TV, quite frankly. But the one negative there is the scale is not there.
We had the same issue. We did that combination, I think it was almost a year ago now, and I agree entirely. The scale wasn't there. We were focusing on, it was more of a regional play, and we just weren't seeing that much in terms of conversion from that. Like the results that we were getting were great, but it was on such a small basis for how much money we were spending. We weren't seeing that that's something we could necessarily do nationally just the investment necessarily doesn't return on the investment that you're going into.
Yeah, I would say most of my clients are high growth stage and they have really aggressive volume goals as far as lead generation. And so most of the time we do a lot of addressable linear plans and they don't get executed.
For us, I would say across the board, just in general, addressable linear, if you're going to go down that route, you really have to be able to talk about media savings, which I don't think everyone can speak to all the time, at least at the agency. I think sometimes that's a concept that goes over people's heads a little bit, but if you can't speak to that, then they're going to have sticker shock when it comes to the pricing. So that's two that have to be coupled together.
Could you guys talk a little bit about formats and frequency across some of these channels? If you're seeing different creative formats work more effectively in different contexts across these channels, and also how you're handling, I mean, on OTT especially, of course, the frequency problem is legendary, but could you talk about how what you're perceiving so far in terms of what sort of creative formats, lengths are working, if they're working differently across these channels, and if you're creating separately for any of them too?
For us, it's all about the consumer experience, right? And we've found that shorter is better. And that is really a conversation to be had with the creative agency, and how do we not just get old repurposed TV assets, but how do we recreate, you know, off of the asset pack or whatever, something that is multi-platform, multi-channel, but has more of a digital, you know, native feel or digital performance behind it as well. I would say that's where CTV for us really comes in, because we can say, take a lot of your old desktop video budgets that we know people aren't really consuming a ton of desktop video anymore, move it to CTV or mobile video where you have the attention. You either have, you know, the single full screen ad on your mobile, or you have the living room type experience on your CTV. So for us, it's really just about how do we be as immersive and impactful, but respect the user's experience as well.
For VSA, it's definitely how do we get the creative to be consistent across the board, that we don't want to have the same creative run in every space, in every length and format. We want to make sure that it's kind of all one seamless storytelling. So whether it's like starting with your anthem spot, but then having different pieces of that story in your 6-second, in your 15-second, in your 30-second, and then also making sure that the longer the video is, the more efficient of that buy is. So if it's a 30-second video, we're gonna make sure that we're paying upon completion and not just a teaser of it and then get rid of that, because it's not a true impression in our opinion then. But when we're looking at, from the consumer standpoint, I agree entirely, the shorter the better, essentially. Like, we know that attention spans are just decreasing. And so having those 6-second teasers or 15-second teasers plays really well from a media standpoint, but not necessarily from a creative standpoint. And so we're constantly working with our creative team to make those optimizations, even with creative, that if we're seeing the receptiveness go down, we know we need to keep changing out those shorter teasers that still tie into our overall creative story, but are like still a little bit more engaging and getting the point across, like a 30 or 60 would.
At Proof, I think it's really about two things. It's the production budget and how personalized we can get with the production budget, and then how personalized we can get within the channels. So again, in a magical world, we'd have infinite dollars and can produce as many personalized ads as possible. I always think of, 16 years ago, Minority Report, that one scene when John Anderson's walking in the mall and he's getting served to the Guinness ad because he's looking stressed, and he's like, you're stressed, are you thirsty? And he goes into the Gap, and I mean, that was 16 years ago, and we're still not there yet, and we're in a room of people that are leading that innovation. So I would say what we try to, where possible, so if we know we're hitting millennials and we're in this space, we'll try to create a 6-second something that fits in with the entire campaign. But if we're in this other space where it's long form, 2 minutes is fine. If we're in kind of the linear TV space, we feel like 15 seconds is kind of the magical mark. But I think it really depends on the creative, the messaging, and your budget.
And your goals. I'm going to
goals.
rock the boat
Yes,
and
goals.
chime in from the low end of the funnel and just say the longer the better is kind of traditionally, what we do. Anything that's sort of viewable like linear TV. So whatever, so obviously I'm not saying go put like 2-minute spots on YouTube, but everything from connected TV, subscription VOD, cable VOD, all those sorts of like unclickable experiences, the longer the better. 60s are our stronghold, and we've tested kind of the 10s, 15s, 30s, and obviously a lot of the inventory out there is shorter too, which is challenging for performance marketing. But yeah, we're still kind of trying to advocate for our clients to not just slap TV spots on all their other campaigns that are like TV, because it's not consumed the same and it doesn't respond the same, even though it's more similar than digital is to linear. But yeah, the longer the better.
Back here.
Hi, Nancy Briscoe from G. I'm just curious what metric you wish pie in the sky existed so you can understand, as we look at proxies to understand audience intent moving down a funnel. I don't care where in the funnel you answer the question, but what you wish existed today that maybe some people in the room could work on to really drive better performance and understanding of how your media is playing. I think actually it already kind of exists, but it's not the best. What I would say is you have to get people away from last click attribution. You have to look at pathing and understand where video really fell into the funnel. I have a lot of brands at Omnicom that are very DR focused. And one of our biggest Chicago accounts, which I sit with every day, they refuse to do any video, and they are probably one of the biggest TV advertisers that you see, and to them it comes down to CPM. And what we were able to do is look at a pathing analysis and say, look, you showed one video and then 15 display ads just because that last 15th ad got the click and then they converted. Add all of those 15 ads together, it actually costs more than your video ad. And so it's really understanding how people are interacting with your media, but then not just taking the last, media source that got them to convert as the source of truth of what's, the driver.
I should probably wish for a performance metric for my client's sake, but I think selfishly I wish for a planning metric. I wish there was just one place I could go and look at actual reach and frequency across all media, across all platforms, holding everything else equal, and actually understand how much of my demo I'm reaching, rather than having to pick and choose through kind of 30 different sources.
Yeah. Selfishly, I'm going to agree with you too.
That's the dream.
I think that is a dream, and I think it can happen now. We're doing that with SpotX and Nielsen to try to measure, again, the unduplicated reach across all these different platforms, but it's always post. And so the magical thing would be, and I feel like we can orchestrate it, would be to marry the two together, which is taking something that is research panel, people you probably aren't your regular consumers, and that's the incremental business you want, and then looking at the real-time data and all the new ways of measuring it, like a Foursquare or other businesses, there are real-time companies that exist, and measuring the two together. So it's almost like what we're talking about today with linear TV or advanced TV, the old format and the new format and how they both can work together. It's the same thing with research companies, just getting the old research companies and the new ones to work better together, I think would be that holy grail.
Yeah, work on that, guys.
We're going to continue this in a roundtable later this morning. Alan, ladies, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.